So welcome to Stories from the Himalayas, a conversation on snow leopards and communities. As I mentioned before, this is a program jointly hosted by the Bhutan Foundation and the Snow Leopard Conservancy. My name is Tshewang Wangchuk, and I'm a snow leopard biologist and the executive director of the Bhutan Foundation. So today it is a rare honor and a privilege for me to introduce our special guest, Dr. Rodney Jackson. He's the president of the Snow Leopard Conservancy and a leading world expert on the snow leopard, having devoted over 40 years to researching and conserving this beautiful, elusive cat in South and Central Asia. So welcome, Rodney.
Thank you, Tshewang, and hello to everybody around the globe in all these far-fetched places. Many of you, I think, have probably been to the Himalayas and maybe know some of the landscapes that are behind me here. But I want to thank Bhutan Foundation for giving us this opportunity to talk about snow leopards. It's something I'm totally
Okay. We are experiencing a little bit of a technical glitch, so please bear with us. But you good there, Rodney?
I'm here. I'm just seeing the first image of myself. I haven't seen anything else. And I'm unmuted. Boy, this is technology. Perfect. It didn't exist a long time ago.
We can, yes, I can hear you well. You know, I hope everybody can hear you as well. So let's move along. So our discussion today will focus on the majestic snow leopard, an apex predator and sentinel of the mountains of the Hindu Kush Himalayas, Central Asia, the Tibetan Plateau, and parts of China, extending all the way to parts of Russia and Mongolia. In fact, its range extends across the desolate expanse of 12 countries in Asia. Primarily, you know, the snow leopard preys on wild ungulates, such as wild sheep, goat, and goat antelopes, but they're also known to prey on livestock, often bringing them into the sphere of herders across its range. Persecuted by poachers to fuel the wildlife trade, and sometimes killed by angry herders who may have lost their livestock to the wildcat, their numbers have dwindled also because their habitats are under threat from development and resource extraction. So today, we will take you back to the mountains and communities where the snow leopards, herders, and others live together. So I hope you enjoy our conversation. This is the National Geographic magazine cover, June 1986 issue. It carried a major story on the pioneering radio tracking study of snow leopards in the Nepalese Himalaya. So Rodney, you were the first biologist to ever collar a snow leopard. You had received a Rolex Award for Enterprise in 1981, and then your 4-year study resulted in this National Geographic article. So here you are fitting a VHF collar on a snow leopard. No one had ever done this before then. So how did you prepare for a moment like this?
Well, I guess I would have to say I didn't prepare totally, you know, thinking about these things right in the proposal to Rolex that this is what is needed, because I had seen snow leopards being poached in my first trip to Nepal, in fact. I just thought, oh, this is going to be easy. But in reality, immobilizing a cat was quite complicated. And the way I went about it, I was fortunate enough that at the same time in Nepal, in the late 70s and early 80s, the first tracking studies of tigers was ongoing. So I was in touch with those folks. I took an immobilization course in California, and I learned how to immobilize a coyote in a cage. Wow, I wasn't ready totally for this. In Nepal, we set up our trap on the very first night. It was actually April Fool's Day. We caught this quite angry male leopard, and of course I had to immobilize it. Our immobilizing kit didn't arrive in time, so we used a nylon dowel about 3 foot long with a needle on it. Anyway, we got the cat immobilized, and we started the study for 4 years.
The snow leopard, of course, is a very elusive animal, but there are several non-invasive methods. Maybe can we move on to the next? There you go. But there are several non-invasive methods to study snow leopards now. A snow leopard biologist today has several tools in her arsenal, from genetics to remote cameras and now drones. So can you tell us a little bit about the advances in the science of studying snow leopards?
Well, it's like studying a ghost, actually, because they are very, very rarely seen. In the first 3 years, other than the times we trapped them, we only saw them maybe once a year, twice a year, if we were lucky. They just have this incredible ability to stay out of the sight of humans. I mean, they see us first, but they have a unique behavior that they love to travel ridge lines, well-defined trails like this. This is in the Longo in our study area of a cat at about 16 or 17,000 feet. And they follow these trails and they mark very intensively by scraping the ground, scenting the rocks. And that is a communication from one snow leopard to another snow leopard, but of course also helps us. So we find that we can go along these trails, predict where they are, collect the scats. The scats can go for genetic analysis nowadays, not back 40 years ago, but certainly now. And now we have camera traps, so we'll talk a bit about that later or show you some pictures of it. But we have a whole new set of tools that I think are going to begin to replace telemetry. And telemetry changed dramatically in 2000 when we got satellite collars. All our work was done from the ground tracking, which is extremely difficult, and it's hard to cover a large area, and certainly as larger areas as snow leopards cover. But with satellites, biologists have sort of become lazy. They sit in their offices now waiting for the data to come in. And we lose in this muddy boots on the ground, which I think is so critical. It's critical because it brings us in contact with local people as well. And training of rangers, I think, is one very critical thing to do. It's something I've been devoted to 20, 30 years of my life to doing. Tshewang, maybe you can tell us where this photograph was taken.
Sure. So going along, following up on that conversation, just training locals, whether, this includes local park or conservation staff, but more importantly, also a lot of local people. So this is really in Jigme National Park. This is the second largest protected area in Bhutan. It's up on the Tibetan border. And here, we got the park staff to work with the community so they train the local yak herders to use these camera traps. And sure enough, soon they were capturing many snow leopard photos, and the locals really started enjoying getting to know these cats a little bit more intimately, even though occasionally, of course, they would lose their yaks or livestock to the cats. But it was amazing, the excitement and just the participation of the locals as they get to know their surrounding even better. So of course, it's still important for us to keep in mind that there are economic losses, when livestock come into contact with predators like the snow leopard. But we'll touch upon that a little bit later on. Field work, of course, while studying the snow leopard is physically demanding. The steep terrain, the remoteness, the isolation, and in much of the areas where we work, you have to travel several days on foot, even to this day. So Rodney, I'm sure you must have a story or two to share on that aspect of snow leopard fieldwork.
Well, I do. It took us 2 weeks to walk into our study area. We had to carry all the food for 3 to 9 months of field work with us. And that meant one jar of peanut butter, one jam, because most of it was scientific equipment. And the picture that you can see now is the ice chada. It's in northern India, and it's the route in winter to a vast area of Zanskar. All the local people, this is their way in and out. They have to walk on the edge of this frozen river, very dangerous. Kids 10 years old, grandmothers 80 years old are doing this because they got to go in and get their supplies. Well, Dala and I, after that 12-day walk, we still had to go beyond the village, and we had to go over Tyson's Cliff. This is Tyson's Cliff. That I can tell you, if I had known about this, known more about it, let's put it that way, when I was writing the proposal, I might have selected another species. And up high on the ridgeline, we had to climb the high ridgelines to be able to monitor these cats.
Yeah.
So, Tshewang, you've traversed through a lot of mountains, Bhutan and elsewhere. What about your experience?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we think we have it tough, but we have the locals, who do it every day. I mean, this is their life. They're adapted and they're really, adapted to life in these beautiful, but of course, tough living conditions. For me, I think the best part of fieldwork in a mountain was always the opportunity to depend on the wisdom of a local guide. There are such repositories of information on snow leopards and other wildlife. We go into these areas once in a while, but they live there all the time. And this here is Appasa. His name means Thursday in Bhutanese. It literally means Thursday in Dzongkha, the Bhutanese language. At 70 years old, he was a valuable addition to a team, and he was always ready to break out in a song and dance routine. Obviously, the locals, they know all the shortcuts. They have, and they have, many other hacks that would make our journeys a lot easier. They're also great animal trackers. So we get a lot more precipitation in Bhutan, being in the eastern Himalayas, compared to a lot of the other parts of the snow leopard range. So the vegetation in Bhutan grows a little higher. But even on grassy vegetation, our local guides like Appasa could easily tell you if an animal had gone this way or that way. Maybe it went that way 3 hours ago. So they are very knowledgeable, and I benefited from the company of many local guides like him across the mountains of Bhutan. This now, I think, is a good segue to a very important and inevitable aspect of snow leopard conservation, the local communities. So Rodney, your work and the work of the Snow Leopard Conservancy has taken you to many communities of mostly herders that share their homes and mountainsides with the snow leopard. And as is often the case, livestock predation by snow leopards often put a financial burden on the herders when they lose their beloved yak or sheep or goat. So in some parts of the range, herders rise up against the predator and kill them. So on the one hand, we're looking out and trying to save this beautiful cat that is threatened globally, and yet on the other hand, we're also talking about people's livelihood. So how do you draw a balance and strive for what we call harmonious coexistence?
Yeah, this is a huge challenge, and it's one that consumes all of us these days, because really, we got to remember back that a lot of these communities are living on incomes of $400, $1,000, maximum $2,000 a year. So they're really right on the edge, and their livestock's absolutely critical to their welfare and their family's welfare. Really, it comes down to two aspects of balancing, I think. The first thing is we must change their perception of snow leopards as being pests more into one of assets. And we can do that by helping them protect their livestock better and reduce depredation losses. So they see snow leopard less as a threat to their livelihood. And if we can switch that whole thing over and diversify their livelihood so they have something alternative to live upon, to depend on to help offset some of the economic loss of depredation, then they can start seeing that they have opportunities to coexist with a predator like snow leopard, I hope also in the future with wolves. So diversifying livelihoods, giving them more economic opportunities is absolutely critical. And Tshewang, what about Bhutan? Can you tell us about Bhutan snow leopards and the communities that share their habitat?
Sure. Well, so let me take you all to a very beautiful part of northwestern Bhutan, to the Jomla region. This area is the beginning or the start of the famed Snowman Trek that some of you may know about, and is a very popular trekking destination, but it is also home to some of the best snow leopard habitats in Bhutan, together with the nearby areas. The natural prey for snow leopards here in this area, or in much of Bhutan, is mainly blue sheep, a goat antelope, which we find in plenty in this area. Here, against the backdrop of the beautiful Mount Chichidrake, we see a mixed herd of blue sheep, some males, females, and young ones mixed together. But this area is also inhabited by several communities nearby who mainly raise yaks. So Rodney, remember this picture in 2012, Rodney, you and I and several other friends, we joined the local park staff to listen to the residents about their thoughts on how to formulate a program that would best serve the community conservation needs of the snow leopards, but also the local community's needs. And at that time, I remember our team used a system of participatory assessment, which is promoted by the Snow Leopard Conservancy, called Appreciative Participatory Planning and Action, or APA. So Rodney, why do you think, or why did you think that such an approach of listening to the communities was important? Do you hear me, Rodney? Yes.
I can hear you, yes, but you are breaking up here. There, I can hear you.
Okay, I asked why a participatory approach such as APA was important.
Okay, well, great. APA means grandfather in Ladakhi and a number of languages. And this is perfect because people really listen to elders. They value that knowledge that elders are carried through their 50, 80 years of life. And it's a participatory program. So we start out not what your problems are and all the difficulties you got to deal with, but how are you successful? How have you been successful living in such a difficult landscape as the Himalayas, with the severe winters and so on? And they can really respond to that. Our goal, of course, is to empower them so that they can do their own planning, so that we don't have to continue with the situation of top-down planning where outsiders come and tell them what they should or shouldn't do. It needs to come from within the community, and within the community, they're going to develop the love and the appreciation for their local environment, and they're going to protect it. Is my sound coming through okay, or do we have an issue here?
Yes. I can hear you. I can hear you. So I'm thinking everybody can hear you well as well. So let's move along.
Sorry, I'm a little delayed here. There seems to be a delay in some of this. What about your experiences with local communities? So we work together.
Yeah. So yeah, going back to that approach, and and of course, listening to the locals, it was very informative. We had a lot of the men and women, who were engaged in very lively discussions and participating in all of these deliberations. And then moving on, one of the important deliberations, at least from that interaction, was really when the community presented to us what they perceived as a dichotomy, sort of looking towards the future, a path that they can take, which could lead to a desired or harmonious realm, and another one that could lead to a disharmonious realm. So anyway, I'll come back to that idea, but then we commissioned, this based on the local people's perceptions. We commissioned a local artist to render this into a beautiful traditional Bhutanese painting called a tanka. The photo on the left, the river kind of divides these two realms. On the upper part of that picture, everything is in order. The snow leopards have enough prey, they keep to themselves, the communities are prospering, there is development, there is tourism, and everything is in harmony. Whereas on the other side, the bottom, sort of undesired state is really the disharmonious realm where there is, a lot of predation on livestock, there's livestock disease, poaching is rife, habitat destruction and pollution are prevalent. So, and then we also use the same idea, the people's perceptions into a jigsaw puzzle, and you can see some kids playing with it. But the point is, the local people are highly knowledgeable. They're very quick to point out that livestock disease and livestock loss due to a disease in this area was actually a bigger cause of yak mortality. Predation, by wildlife ranked a little lower than that. And we had the local livestock officer with us, so helping him with the resources to tackle the disease was an important next step. So herders in Bhutan are generally very law-abiding and spiritual, and in my more than 25 years of experience in this area, I've not come across one single case of retaliatory killing. Well, actually, let me also share another story. This is my friend Wangchuk. He's a young herder. He lives in the mountains looking after his family's yaks. And this was around the time when cell phones were just becoming popular in Bhutan, and the cellular network was spreading across the country. He figured out a few spots in the mountains where he would get a cell phone signal. And somehow he got my number from my sister. And at 4 a.m. in Washington, D.C., where I was, he would call me to just talk to me about snow leopards. Of course, time zone was not a concept for him. Soon we talked about camera traps, and he got very excited. And on my next trip to Bhutan, we took a few camera traps for him and trained him how to use them. And not long after that, he caught 3 snow leopards, a mother and 2 grown cubs, actually devouring what turned out to be one of his yaks. One would think that he would be furious, but no. I mean, he resigned it to fate. He said maybe the local deities were displeased with him, and he laughed at his misfortune. But he was very excited to get to see the snow leopards. And of course, I don't take his losses lightly. This isn't my point. I think this is why we have to institute mechanisms whereby conservation should bring benefits to local communities. The important point I would like to make is that our local herders are very fast learners. If we can use their language, their knowledge, and couple that with the right tools and resources, then they can become valuable, empowered champions of conservation. But Rodney, I know that livestock predation is not always received in this light everywhere across the snow leopard range. So what are some of your experiences with snow leopards and livestock in other parts of the snow leopard range?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And I think Bhutan should credit itself for the fact that it has a good prey base, a natural prey base for snow leopard, which I think helps offset depredation issues. So elsewhere in the range, blue sheep and tahr have been depleted in number, and livestock numbers have gone up, actually, often overgrazing the capacity to support them. So it's not surprising that snow leopards might find livestock easier to kill. And of course, that leads into this direct and very contentious conflict of human-wildlife conflict. Well, we want to switch that whole thing around so that herders come to view snow leopards as assets helping them in their life, not thwarting them in their life by depleting their livelihood. And we mentioned 2 things earlier, predator proof in the corral and increase in the income. Well, another thing that's happened naturally by communities that we have worked with, or our partners have worked with, and discussed the opportunities and explored alternative scenarios to the future. This picture is taken in Tajikistan by one of our members of the Land of the Snow Leopard Network. And there, typically, the snow leopard would get into the livestock pen, which were in the basement of houses or a little building attached to a house. They could get in by jumping through a smoke hole or something. Then they'd kill all the livestock that are in there, of course, because the instinct of a snow leopard to track and kill its prey is separate from eating, and unfortunately causes huge anger and conflict. They can't get out, and people would come in and stone them or beat them to death. Now they're releasing them. They call in the wildlife department and they're releasing the cats into a less populated area. Well, it's very simple also to predator-proof these corrals, like this one in Ladakh. And these corrals are pretty typical around the area. They have low walls. It's easy for a snow leopard to jump up on the wall and then jump in. And then the milieu of all these sheep and goats that you can see here, they can kill up to 50 or 60 or more at a single time. And catastrophic, of course, to the herder. All we have to do is put wire mesh on that roof, and we can stop that. The livestock's safe inside, the cat can't get in. Next slide, if we can have it. Maybe fox lights. We'll come on to fox lights later again. And I want to talk about some of those there. So, yeah,
so
here we
have
are.
The fox lights there,
this is what I was looking for. So happy herders are herders that have predator-proof corrals, and they also have this yellow thing in this woman's hand. It's called a fox light. It's invented by a friend of ours in Australia that did it for the sheep actually against the dingoes in Australia, but it seems to work for wolves, it works for snow leopards, and hopefully other animals as well, other predators. But it's a light that flashes at night, can be seen up to half a mile away or so, and it seems to give the predators a pause. They sort of, it's unfamiliar to them. Imagine how dark the Himalayas are. There's no lights around and you see this thing flashing. It kind of sends them back. However, we are worried that over time, some individuals, being so adaptable, will become habituated to it. And we need to always be working on new inventions. And one of the things we're working on is an intelligent camera trap that would turn on various deterrents to keep predators away. So, Tshewang, can you share maybe some of your other successes in Bhutan with, you know, other ways of involving the local community?
Thanks, Rodney. Yeah, those are all great stories, and we have many. Yes, so another outcome of our engagement with the community resulted in the first Jomla Mountain Festival in 2013. And this began actually as a way of starting a community event to increase, we thought, you know, with a motive to increase tourism and therefore revenue in the area, but also as a platform for the locals to showcase their craft, the culture like song and dance music, local sports such as horse racing and strongman competition, and more importantly for the children to also join in the festivities. On the second day of the festival, local guides will take guests on day hikes into the mountains, lakes, and glaciers. And actually today would have been the first day of the 8th Jomla Mountain Festival, you know, but of course, you know, we can't have it this year. However, it turns out that the festival has now become more of an event for the nearby communities to pause work, take a break, and come together to participate in the festivities. The local authorities, you know, the local government, national park staff, the livestock officials, the health officials, the school, they all come together to, you know, together with the community members to make it a truly collaborative event in this area. The number of tourists, of course, you know, participating is just slowly growing, but I think more importantly, this has become more of a local event now. The participation of the school children, you know, is also very important for, you know, this community, as they are seen as those with the key to the future of the community as well as those of the snow leopards. And here, you know, you have oh, there you go. So this here, you know, the children are wearing these snow leopard hoodies, you know, thanks to generous donation from Spirit Hoods. You know, so I would like to thank them through the Snow Leopard Conservancy. You know, these are donations from the company that makes these beautiful snow leopard hoodies. Using the help of local elders and education specialists, we also developed a set of readers with books for children that could not only be used here, but all over Bhutan. And we have them both in Dzongkha, in the local Bhutanese language, and also in English. In fact, this year we made the ebook versions available for everyone online. And we'll email a link to all of you attending today so that you can, you know, download these children's ebooks as well. Yeah. So the Snow Leopard Conservancy also has special programs for youth in countries like Nepal, Pakistan, India, Mongolia, and you know, and many of these range countries. So Rodney, why do you think it is important for us to reach out to the youth?
You know, I think all of us will agree that our children are going to inherit a world that is totally different from what we experience as kids, and they're going to have a lot of issues to deal with. So it's really important early on to get them knowledge about the environment, how to deal with environmental issues, whether they are dealing with trash and pollution or protecting snow leopards and other biodiversity. They're the next generation of conservationists after all. And I'd like to give an example from one of our partners out of Pakistan, a little NGO there that works up in northern Baltistan area, Ghulam Muhammad. I really credit Ghulam for bringing school education to the girls. Up until a few years ago, very few girls had the opportunity to get involved in education. Now they're one of the key leaders, and actually, thanks to Ghulam. And there's a whole series of programs for middle and high school kids about the environment, about snow leopards, and about the asset that they live close to that lives nowhere else in the world. So they should treasure it just as Africans treasure lions or elephants. This is the real pearl for all of South and Central Asia. And thanks to governments coming together, and I really want to give a vote to governments right now. All 12 states of the snow leopard range states have come together in 2012 and formed a global snow leopard environmental protection plan called GSLIP. And the goal of that was to return by the year 2020, this year, 20 landscapes that have very vibrant populations of snow leopards, maybe 100 snow leopards in each, living in harmoniously with local communities, having plenty of prey and not subsisting on livestock. Well, we're not quite there yet. That timeline is put out to 2023. But I think with events like International Snow Leopard Day, which I hope you will join us on October the 23rd, or join GSLIP. We celebrate International Snow Leopard Day, and these have been going on now for 4 or 5 years, as I recall, regionally in Mongolia, in Russia, in Kyrgyzstan, in Nepal. Many of the countries bring their kids together. They educate in the general population at the same time on International Snow Leopard Day. So, you know, we need good habitat for snow leopards as well as people. And we have to wonder, what are some of the alternative initiatives that SLC is involved in? We could have the next slide. Oops.
Perfect.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
So moving on.
Okay.
Glad to see you back in the picture, Rodney. Actually, I was getting comments that people could not see you, but now you're back in the frame.
I can't see myself, you know, and
oh,
so
that's fine.
This is, oh, okay.
There you go. We can see you. So, so my next question, of course, now is, you know, if you can maybe tell us a little bit about some of the other successful initiatives that the Snow Leopard Conservancy is currently involved in.
Yeah. Okay. Well, these two little cats looking over the hill, you would never have seen this before, but now you do. And it's thanks to these women like this that operate homestays. So if we could have the next slide, please, this one, thank you. Before, in about 2003, UNESCO asked us to look into tourism in Ladakh and 5 other countries in Central Asia with a lot of other partners. And we went to the community and we asked them, well, you know, how can tourism benefit you? And they said immediately, well, big hotels and all this big infrastructure, roads and stuff, doesn't benefit it. It actually creates problems for us. What you can do, what you should do, is create something we call traditional homestays. And we're a very hospitable people, the Ladakhis, and we like people to visit us. And we have a nice room in our house that we can set aside for you, and you can come and stay with us, see how we live, eat our food, talk to us over dinner. And boy, has that made the difference. We gave them hospitality training, you know, how to do things hygienically, what kind of, something on the customs of Westerners, what they would expect. And the idea is for $10 to $15 a night, paid directly to the homestay provider, people would have that one night, or if they wanted to go 4 nights, they could do that opportunity. And what it has done, instead of local people wanting to keep more livestock, kill or trap more snow leopards that got into problems, they flipped the whole thing around. They suddenly realized they're getting a lot more income from people coming for homestays and the opportunity to see a snow leopard. And suddenly they send their kids to a better school, a functional school in the town, and they know that their kids are going to have a better future because of it. So they've linked that directly back to the presence of snow leopards. Photographers have learned that if you want to see a snow leopard in the wild, you go to Ladakh. We send people there every winter, and we've been doing this since 2005 or 6. And I would have to say in all those 14, 16 years, every group has seen a snow leopard, sometimes from only 50 yards away, sometimes from further. But remember, when Dala and I started our study in Nepal in the 80s, we'd see them only once a year. Now we know multiple people can come and see them, and we know that it's linked in with the conservation. So thank you to snow leopards for finally showing themselves. They do that because they know they're safe. They know they've got guardians on their side. This old male was part of a film, actually, that we did it with Nature Series back in 2005 or thereabouts. And he reigned over this change in environment where suddenly snow leopards had a future where they did not have a secure one before. So it's things like this that I think really make a difference. And we wonder about Bhutan, where things are there too.
Rodney, do you want to talk about that new book that is just out, and then I can go back to Bhutan?
Okay, I can. I thought we were going to end with this. Well, we've just published a book along with a lot of photographers on snow leopards. And it's a book, a coffee table book, with all the photographs are taken by the photographer. Not one is a camera trap, not one. And you'll see many camera trap pictures on the internet, but getting pictures, getting close enough to a snow leopard is not always easy. This book has it, and you can obtain it on Amazon or SLC's website. So yeah, so that's all I have to say about it. Email us, and we're happy to give you more information about the book.
Okay, so on that note, so we now come to this beautiful picture of the snow leopard taken by Steve Winter. I think we always like to look at this and share this, but this year has been very tough for everyone. It's been anything but normal, so it's been, I think, affected all of us. The coronavirus pandemic has affected everybody across the globe. So I want to ask you, Rodney, so how are some of the communities you work in doing amidst this pandemic?
Well, this is truly a global pandemic. So first and foremost, tourism has essentially collapsed in the area. And for a lot of these remote areas in Nepal, in northern Pakistan or India, tourism was a mainstay of income other than remittances from the local youth going overseas to work in the Gulf and so on. So it's been catastrophic. But I would have to say, maybe because they face a lot of difficulties, they face very severe winters that are hard to predict, and the catastrophic ones, maybe once every 5 or 10 years, that ends up killing 80 or 90% of their livestock because of deep snow and hypothermia and so on. So people have adapted, and they've obviously been in touch with their family members who have traveled outside, and they quarantine themselves, and they've been very strict about not letting outsiders in, even local nationals, and insisting that they have a certification that they've been tested and they're not contagious, that they go into quarantine, all of this. So they're adaptable, and they're doing that because they know they have no medical service or very little. We had one community that was stuck in Kathmandu because they go out, just in early spring to buy all their supplies for the rest of the year. And they were in Kathmandu when the quarantine order came down, and they were all couldn't travel back to their village. And we were really worried because they couldn't get back in time to hoe the fields, to plant the crops. So we did give them a grant to purchase food in Kathmandu, so nobody, and also PPE supplies, etc. So they are adapting, but none of our team members are able to be in the field. Things are beginning to open a little right now, except in Nepal, I hear there's a sudden spike, like there is in Europe, of infections. So who knows what's going to happen? We personally are counting that this year is pretty well out for us to do field work. We focus more on planning, strategic planning, fundraising. So that's very critical, obviously, to keep the funds going, and also to think how we can adapt, how we can avoid this in the future by having more robust and resilient programs. at Tshewang? I don't know. What's the news from Bhutan? What can you share with us from there?
Yeah, thank you, thank you. And so for Bhutan, of course, I think some of you may know. I think Bhutan has handled the pandemics quite well so far. I think we have what they call all of country response. Starting from with the leadership of His Majesty the King, the Ministry of Health, the government, and of course supported by hundreds of health workers and thousands of frontline workers and volunteers. I think the total positive cases so far has been only around 313. A lot of them recovered with zero fatality, luckily so far. So I think we have a lot to be thankful about. But going back to the communities, the mountain communities, I think by nature, they are resilient, right? Because even in a non-pandemic year, or because of the high passes that they have to traverse, because of the geographical location, they have to stock up. They would have normally a year's worth of provisions already, at all times. So that way they are, pretty well adapted. But of course, I think slowly it's going to affect everyone. So I think on that high note, I think we will come, we are coming towards the end of the conversation part of it. But I think before we end, I think I want to ask one last question to you, Rodney. I mean, in terms of, I think today we covered a lot of ground. We covered, we shared insights into the majestic snow leopard, their habitat, the communities, and finally, I also want to pose a question to you with your work, and experience. So Rodney, what do you think? What does the future hold for the snow leopard? I mean, do you see a bleak future or a bright future?
Boy, that's an interesting question. Of course, you have to think when, but, overall, I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic for several reasons. One, because with very few people, so the level of conflict is a little bit more manageable, perhaps. But more importantly, we've got people that have lived for thousands of years in relative harmony with their environment. They have a religion, many of them, whether they're Buddhist, whether they're Islamic, that does actually value nature and the surroundings. And because of that resilience, that traditional knowledge, and especially the emergence of indigenous knowledge, what we really want to do is to blend together Western science to solutions with local indigenous knowledge, because I think local indigenous knowledge is not going to prove any concepts or anything like that, but it's going to make conservation practical. It brings it down to the common person, the person who doesn't necessarily live in a university or some fancy developing third, nation in Europe, but lives in quite a challenging environment. So overall, I'm optimistic as long as we can keep doing these kind of programs. We've got to scale them up. We've got to bring them to more communities, more countries. We've got to get government to empower local communities much more than they have in the past, perhaps. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I hope all of you can participate in that. I thank all the 12 range states and the NGOs and the population for all that they've done to make the snow leopard. I think it's much more of it's a success in many ways. It's rare. It's definitely threatened with endangerment, but I think its future is quite optimistic.
Thank you, and I share the same sentiments. I think I speak for from my understanding of what's going on in Bhutan. We have very progressive, well thought out conservation policies. We have a law-abiding and very, the local communities are highly supportive of conservation efforts, and the threats that you find in many other countries are quite minimal or almost non-existent in Bhutan. So Bhutan has a lot to offer because I think of its strong conservation ethics and all that. So on that high note, I guess we will, we're now coming to the end of the conversation part of it, and I hope all of you enjoyed it as much as I have. And I'd like to thank Rodney for sitting through and sharing all of these stories with us. But now let's pick up a couple of the questions, and we'll try to get to, I think in the interest of time, we probably may not be able to get to all of the questions thrown at us, but let us go through a few of them. So I'll go to this one question from Rob Green. So Rodney, you talked about diversifying herders' livelihoods to provide them more economic opportunities. What strategies would you suggest could economically benefit herders and snow leopard populations without being imperialistic or forcing a new economic model that only caters to ecotourism?
Mm-hmm. Well, these are interesting and difficult questions. Thank you, Rob. I think we build on what herders and what people are doing already and just make it more successful. We know that in many parts of the snow leopard range, livestock are overstocked, meaning they are too much for the grass and the vegetation to support. And there's a good reason why people have followed that strategy. They followed it because they know that once in a decade, or maybe more frequently now because of global warming and climate change, they will have a catastrophic winter. The ground will be covered by 2 to 3 feet of snow. They do not have enough forage stored in their houses, and they know they will lose 80–90% of their livestock. So their strategy is based on maximizing numbers for catastrophic events. What we would like to do here is to increase their revenue from fewer livestock, more healthy livestock under a one animal health sort of program that's producing products that are being sold at higher value than they get right now. It's a pipe dream. I think we can do it. It's going to be a lot of work, but let's think about products like dog chew. A lot of you might have heard that there's this very hard Tibetan cheese that's coming into the US and is now a good chewing thing for dogs' teeth. Things like that, you know. There's sea buckthorn, and I know sea buckthorn's not attached to herding, but herders live in amongst it all the time, and they could spend some of their time collecting the berries that have medicinal value, that have vitamin C value as a drink. It could be sold in local lodges for tourists, etc. So I think there are opportunities, but those opportunities are going to come forth by us engaging the community. So let's help COVID-19 goes as quick as possible so we can get back out there.
Thank you. So moving on to another question, this is from Mark Day. So it says, while many positive actions are obviously being done across the range of snow leopards, nevertheless, poaching for illegal wildlife trade does continue. So what is being done to either deter poaching in country and detect smuggling of snow leopard body parts on customs borders?
Yeah, this also is a difficult problem. So at a higher level, I know there are organizations that are working on trying to reduce the demand for wildlife products by maybe using other traditional medicines that is not as harmful. That's something that we don't get involved in. What we really want to be involved in is to enable local governments and local people to monitor their environment and detect poachers. The poaching's not being done so much by local people. It's almost entirely outsiders that come in and do that. And one of the things that we would hope that we're going to be able to field test early next spring is an intelligent camera. It exists now. We're going to test it in the zoos in the next month or so, but it's a algorithm now that is able to recognize in real time a snow leopard, a wolf, a bear, a dog, and other species can be added. So that if we link that to where we have mobile connection, mobile phones, or a satellite phone to something like the municipality center or some point of communication, we can alert the community, and we could put around the village what we call these village guards. There might be 5 or 6 cameras that would protect that village, at least from approaching predator concern. We could also link it, I think, to some kind of deterrent, a noise deterrent or light, like the fox lights. It could turn on a bright light, and I'm sure animals would turn around and run away from it. It could have an angry herder shouting, "Get the hell out of here," etc.
So the next one is a question on, okay, let me get to this. This is from Sherry Young. So this is about Bhutan. I guess this is a very fascinating talk. I'm curious regarding the position of women in the snow leopard conservation world in Bhutan. Are women given the opportunity to become rangers or scientist leaders? Is it something they realize they can do and show interest in doing so? or is their leadership mainly within the communities through education and or developing the local economy through different activities? I think if you know a little bit about Bhutan, I think women in our society do play an active role in a lot of leadership positions. Traditionally, I think because back in the olden days, for education or modern education, people had to travel overnight, several days, and it was usually the boys or the men, who were sent out to schools. But right now, I think we have more women in schools than more girls in schools than men. We have women ministers and parliamentarians, and so even in the communities, I think, including rangers and and park officials, we have several women who are leading the charge. So I think they have equal opportunity, and in fact, we have very effective women leaders. One example, our health minister right now, handling this whole coronavirus problem in Bhutan is a woman, and she has effectively been leading the charge, together with so many others supporting her. So yes, the leadership is there. I think it's opportunities are present as well. The next question I think we have is this centers around. I think we had a couple of questions about compensation. What are our thoughts on compensation schemes for livestock? Sort of monetary compensation for livestock predation.
Shall I answer that?
Yes, please.
So make a start on it anyway. Yeah, compensation is brought up almost immediately by many communities. And it's a logical thing for them to think about. The challenge, of course, two challenges. One is, where's the funding going to come from on a sustainable basis? Because there are a lot of losses each year, and they can be as high as 2 to 3% of the herd. That's the one challenge. The other is how you're going to deal with, corruption or somebody claiming a loss when they don't have a loss. And the solution that seems to be coming forward is to focus more on compensation programs that are managed and operated by local communities with a fixed fund. They need to contribute to that fund. They need to know that there's not an endless source of money coming into the fund, so they need to make best use of it for hardship cases, and maybe even use it for other activities. We've got to address the root causes of depredation, and we got to stop the depredation before it happens. And the best way for that is to make better herders, more vigilant herders, and predator-proof corrals.
Thank you.
I don't know what your experience is, Tshewang, on
no,
that.
it's similar too. I think one question that always comes, when people talk about compensation is the sustainability. Are there other more intelligent ways of compensating, not just by doling out small amounts of money, which I feel sometimes it's almost an insult to the local herders. But instead, I think if you look at the root causes, like Rodney, like you said, sometimes there are other factors, that bring even bigger economic burden to the herders, such as disease, and that's something you can fix by working with local authorities. Likewise, other incentives, that bring more sustainable ways of livelihoods. I think those are probably good solutions. In some places, I think livestock insurance has been tried successfully. So there are different solutions. I think snow leopard conservation, of course, is a multi-pronged. It has to take a multi-pronged approach, and will be different, in different places. We have a couple of other questions. We have some questions regarding the altitude at which the Jomla Mountain Festival takes place. So that's in the Jomla area. It's roughly about 4,000 meters above sea level. So that's an easy question. Moving on, I think we have a couple of questions as to climate change. How is climate change affecting, or is climate change going to affect snow leopards?
Shall I take a stab at it?
Yes, please.
Another difficult question.
The specific question is...
There's been some prediction.
Yeah. Go ahead. The specific question isn't climate change a big threat to the snow leopard population? There you go.
Okay. We think it is a potentially big threat, but we don't know to what extent. We do know, however, that climate change is not going to have a uniform effect across such a vast range. So snow leopard range is really about 2,500 miles by 2,000 miles. It's a huge area, the size of the Western US, for example. And in that, there's different influence of local climate. So some areas might get wetter, some areas will get warmer, some areas will get drier. And trying to predict where that is going to happen is a challenge. Along the Himalayas, since this is our subject for this meeting, what we expect to happen is that the forest line, the tree line, is going to go up in elevation. In eastern Nepal and Bhutan, it's around 12,000, a little over 12,000 feet, I think, somewhere around that. It's going to increase, and that means that the amount of land between the snow and the ice and the living land, the land that supports pastures and shrubland where all life lives, is become narrower and narrower, meaning that people and wildlife and other animals, biodiversity, have to share the same space, even less space. So that's going to be a challenge. And human-wildlife conflict mitigation is going to be critical to resolving that. More studies are needed. We don't have weather stations out there. Local people are beginning to adapt. They know well that there's, you know, less snowfall, that their irrigation is under threat. So there is, again, a multi-pronged approach to this. And how snow leopards will react, I don't know, but I do know that snow leopards do very well in the Gobi Desert. Who can imagine a hotter place in summer, a colder place in winter, and a drier place in the world? And they're doing just fine there. So I'm hopeful.
Thank you. I think we are, you know, really towards the end of our program here now. Thank you, Rodney. I will give a virtual applause to Rodney, and I'm sure everybody will join. Everybody's joining me in thanking you, and of course, thanks to both the Snow Leopard Conservancy team and the Bhutan Foundation team for helping us behind the scenes. We still have many questions. We have had good attendance. Please keep those questions coming. Here you can see our contacts, our website, and Rodney and I, with the Snow Leopard Conservancy and the Bhutan Foundation, we're working together on a proposal right now to look at how to build more resilient snow leopard communities one in Bhutan and another one in Nepal, and we continue to work together. So again, thank you very much, Rodney, and for sharing all these with all of us here. And thank you all for joining us today. Stay safe, and we'll hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.